Good day, everyone. I hope that everybody is enjoying this GALA conference. And today is the last day. However, we have great presentations still left for today. And one of those is the one that we are going to be presenting in a moment. My name is David Utrilla, CEO of US Translation Company. And it is my privilege to introduce you this presentation called a new Dialogue on the Path to Tomorrow. Is the development of machine translation has progressed by leaps and bounds these recent years, yet as a number of players hopping on the bandwagon continues to grow, so does the diversity of views regarding what hurdles lie ahead, what lessons have to be learned from the past, and indeed where the bandwagon should actually be going. Our expert panelists today have been brought together and bring some clarity into this discussion and provide answers to the questions we are asking or should be asking ourselves about MT, the universe of and everything. To introduce the panel, we have our moderator, Dr. Donald DePalma. He has more than 30 years of experience in the fields of technology, language services, and market research as the founder and chief strategist of the permanent market research firm CSA Research. He is involved in shaping the strategies of many of the world's largest technology firms and the industry's most influential language services providers. Our next panelist is Lucy Segun, is the Chief Executive Officer of Canada's Translation Bureau. She is focused on building a strong and highly qualified workforce, leveraging the latest technologies advances, including artificial intelligence, and working closely with partners and clients to effectively deliver quality linguistic services now in the future. The next one is panelist is Michael Simard. Is a senior researcher at the National Research Council of Canada. His main research interest is machine translation. He's particularly interested in how people and machines can collaborate to produce high quality text. Our next panelist, Konstantin Savenkov, spent many years leading research and development efforts for online content service and working as chief of technology and operations in various firms. In 2016, he contributed to his experience in artificial intelligence, technology, and operations to found Intento, Inc., where they build tools to source, evaluate, and use machine translation and other cognitive AI services. And the last and not least presenter is Kirill Solovek, is the CEO and co-founder of Contento Quo, a translation technology company that helps its clients reduce translation quality risk, improves vendor performance, and boosts MT quality. During his 20 years industry career, Kirill served in diverse buyer side and vendor side roles, and he is frequent speaker, panelist, and panel organizer at industry conferences and events in Europe, Asia, and the US. Before we give the time to our panelists and hosts, I would like to remind you that 10 minutes to the hour, we are going to have a Q&A session. You can ask your questions at any time during the presentation in the Q&A section, and those questions will be read to the panelists at the end of the presentation. Go ahead, Don, take it over.
Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for coming today. I remember when I first saw the title for this, it was somewhat disconsonant with the topic. Hurdles and Answers, a new dialogue made me think of pandemics and pandemonia that have happened over the last couple of years and certainly over the last few months. But what we're looking at here is a long-running debate, a discussion about the role of humans and technology, something that's been a function ever since the word robot was invented and probably long before that. So we're talking about automation in various forms, but importantly, automation as it relates to language technology. The big thing here we'll be talking about today are three topics, three themes. What we have here is the first is we're going to take a look at where we are, where we've been, and what we think the obstacles are. Those are the hurdles that are out there. Then we'll move on to the questions of which technologies are in the offing. What do we see on the horizon in terms of things like, well, we have adaptive MT. We'll look at responsive MT. We'll look at some of the solutions that have been offered or are being offered by a couple of the companies on the panel, and research work that's coming out of the NRCC in Canada. And then finally, we'll look at the big, let's not to mix species, but the elephant in the room, where humans fit in this loop. With that topic, we addressed the question of, say, looking forward. What some futurists have been saying over time that within 5 years, 10 years, what's going to be the role of humans? Are we just sort of sitting on the sidelines, or do we have an active role in AI and everything that comes from it? So before we move on, I'd like to have a poll question put up. We'll start with a commonly asked question. When companies and organizations, governments are looking at machine translation on artificial intelligence, natural language, there's always some questions about what actually works, what things have you researched. So here's a list of a half dozen items that we've encountered in our research on what keeps organizations from using MT. So if you, everyone in the audience would click on whichever of these or all of them as they might apply, we can continue our discussion and then get back to these questions once we get your answers. So let's start with the first theme of today, taking stock of where we are with machine translation. What are the obstacles to more widespread use, to addressing the question up on the screen? And as I said, there's a lot of futurists who are saying that this is something which is imminent. One of the specialists in the space takes the point of singularity being somewhere in the next 5 to 8 years. And at that point, who knows where we'll all be. So the singularity for machine translation is it works right out of the box. It's appropriate for all use cases. It is correct in every instance. And as I like to say about technology claims, it chops, it dices, it consoles people in their declining years. It does just about everything. So I'd like to start with Lucy for our panel here. As you know, she's the head of the Translation Bureau in Canada, which has a government mandate to make sure that everybody in that broad country with lots of languages can understand what the government is up to. So Lucy, I'll throw the floor open to you.
Thank you, Don, and hello to everyone who's participating and my fellow panelists. It's really great to be here. I looked at the poll that you just put up for us, Don, and the hype. I think for the government of Canada, it is essential to have quality in the equation, but that means making sure that we leverage AI and technology because we have a mandate to translate words in English and French simultaneously. And this is not just nice to have, it's a legal obligation of all government agencies. And that's for 350 million words per year. So technology has been great. It is absolutely useful, but can it solve everything? And do we still need humans in the loop? I would say definitely yes, to ensure quality. And what I mean by quality is equal meaning in both languages simultaneously. And that's important not only for, a translation gone bad can cause political kind of risks, but it cannot be as severe as, missing children, Amber alerts or avalanche alerts. You need to make sure that it is correct in both languages. So I would start by saying that to Don.
Well, one of the things in the topic is about neural machine translation and how that's been a major driver for machine translation quality in the terms that you stated, which is basically equal meaning in both languages. Is that the only criterion that you have, that it has to be equal, or there in other use cases, there's aspects of, let's say, what a particular audience might want or need? Is there any localization to those different communities?
Certainly, certainly. So, as the federal entity responsible to communicate in two official languages, but we also have a mandate to communicate to Canadians in 100 foreign and Indigenous languages. You can imagine that, in particular for Indigenous languages, there are many families of languages and dialects. So, but in terms of equal meaning for the both languages, it is basically ensuring that the Canadians are understanding the same information from their government agency in English and in French. So we are very adamant about making sure that humans are involved in reviewing the output of our machines. And that's principally to make sure that we have those high quality translations that then feed the process. So, our high quality post edits are feeding our AI, ultimately algorithms, so that we basically can expect increased productivity and increased accuracy. But again, the machine is not there yet, so we still need the humans to make sure that that is always acceptable for Canadians.
We have the National Research Council here of Canada represented, which presumably is helping the Translation Bureau on this front. So we've heard about humans, there's technology, but there's also apparently stuff like training data. How can you train this? So how is the Research Council involved in this effort?
Yeah, well, first, as a civil servant with the Canadian government myself, I can only agree with Lucie that we need high quality text to communicate internally within government, but also with the public at large. This is very clear. Quality is when time comes to communicate with the public, it's a priority number one. And I think that this is where we need to put the focus on the needs, the requirements in terms of quality of the end users, of the people we are communicating with. And when I say that, I also mean that, so of course, it's important to have high quality training data, or I should say just bilingual data, because it's used for machine translation, but as you all know, it's also used for translation memories and for the professional linguists that need that data. And I really think we should focus on the needs of these people first, rather than the needs of the machine. And I say that because so nowadays we tend to think of training data as the parallel data that we use to feed machine translation engines. But there's a lot of research currently into the so-called zero-shot or few-shot approaches in machine translation, where these machine translation systems or natural language processing systems in general basically learn to do things that they have actually never seen done. So I think a good example of that is just a few weeks ago, a bunch of researchers at Google put out an article about their Pathways language model, or PALM for short. This is a monster of a transformer model. I think it's something like 500 billion parameters. It's trained on, I think, 800 billion words of multilingual text, but not parallel text. And this thing comes very close to the state of the art in machine translation. And these machines, these new models work by basically studying monolingual text and learning how the same concepts are expressed in different languages, but not from parallel text. So right now we use parallel text to feed our machine translation engines, but 2 years from now, 5 years from now, maybe it won't be that important. So focus on the needs of the users and don't worry too much about the machines because they do things their own way. So
yeah, Michelle, just one thing. Some people in the audience might not really understand or know the range of zero shot. So if you one way is to do it is with parallel text, but say one language into another, and then from that language into yet another for training. So French into say English, but then maybe English into I don't know if there's any parallels in Canada, but into Inuit for its samples, or Chinese. So that's one model. Can you tell us what else might be what you're working on in that front?
So yeah, there's a pivot language approach, but the more general, what we see recently are really very general purpose. And when I say general purpose, I don't mean machine translation. I mean general purpose natural language processing systems that are trained on just multilingual data, and just the exposure to English text and French text and perhaps Inuktitut text, if we have it, is enough for the systems to learn at least basic correspondences between these languages, even if that data is not intrinsically parallel. In other words, if it's not a translation memory, somehow there's some magic going on that if you expose these systems to enough data, they seem to learn correspondences between languages. And just by exploiting commonalities between the languages. And the result is that these systems, without ever seeing translation, learn how to translate, which is pretty magic, but yes, that's what we see. I mentioned the Google's Pathways language model, but that's just one example. This is something that we see all over the place right now in AI research. These, what we call zero shot or few shot, where you basically, a system is asked to perform a task that it has never seen actual examples of, or very few examples of. So.
Okay, so that's taken us off over into the lots of data will help. And as we accumulate this data in the future, the tools are getting smarter, and they'll be able to take advantage, which means we should be collecting more data now, more metadata, even if we don't know what to do with it. Is that?
Yeah, well, certainly one of the aspects is so one of the benefits of these approaches, these new approaches, is that there's still a lot more monolingual data out there. Even within an organization such as the Canadian government, there is lots and lots of monolingual English and monolingual French and possibly monolingual indigenous languages data that can be used for that purpose. And the important aspect there is to learn how to recognize that high quality data and distinguish it from being able to distinguish between high quality and low quality data. But the bottom line here is keep your data. don't throw it away.
I was just reading something about NASA, U.S. Space Agency, that is keeping bits of moon rock around untested, so collected 20 or 30 years ago, just because there's an assumption that sometime in the future there'll be a machine that can do kinds of tests that don't exist yet. So rather than give it tainted materials, so collect lots of data. I want to get back to the humans in the loop here, because we have this traditional view of where humans are, and we have this person called a post editor, which kind of is sort of redundant, since the editing is going on after the fact. It's post by definition, but that's one model that we have. But what we're talking about here increasingly is this notion of having this human in the middle, this human in a loop, taking advantage of information that comes to them, and they have the opportunity at a segment level to say, okay, this works or this doesn't work. I'd like to replace it. That's the adaptive model. So where does I'll turn to Kiro for this. Where does a human fit in this kind of model in what you're doing in the analysis that your tool is doing?
Yeah, great question, Don. So I was listening to Michelle being very, I would say, poetic even about how the advances of technology are going. But I live in Estonia. We tend to be a little bit more pessimistic here. So let's talk about translation mistakes. I think our view on this, being heavily involved into translation quality programs with government translation agencies and corporates alike, is everyone makes mistakes, humans and machines included. So we kind of tend to place them on the same spectrum, if you know what I mean. But what I think is interesting is the process that you can apply to analyze the mistakes that both machines and humans make. This is very much a commonality between the two. So we tend to see more similarities between how machines and humans work rather than differences, because again, if it produces translation, there's a chance that a translation will go wrong. And we need to do something about it, because in terms of risk, as Lucy was saying in the beginning, sometimes it might be okay to have a certain type of mistake. Sometimes the ramifications are political, but sometimes they're catastrophic and life or death type of decisions, right? And those kind of mistakes can be uh, slipping through both machine and human, and actually any combo of post editing alike. So I think the big question that we ask in terms of the quality of data and how humans are involved is, how can we be rigorous about analyzing the kind of things that goes wrong in translation and collecting this data over time? So data on data, if you want, or metadata to inform, just like Don, you were saying about those moon rock samples from NASA, to inform future decisions with whatever we're doing today. So that's maybe one kind of enrichment, I think, that we're very passionate about and see lots of value on. How can we enrich our translations, human, machine, or hybrid, with information on what kind of mistakes they might have? How can we apply risk management techniques to control this whole augmented translation flow better and make sure that wherever it goes wrong, this actually matches with, let's say, the acceptable level of risk for this or that use case. So that's how we tend to view things.
One of the traditional ways of managing translation flows is really from the classic business cost, turnaround time, just some sense of quality, whatever that quality might be. And that's a term that is really tough to define. It's use case driven, domain driven, whatever else. But what you're talking about here is something which is a much more critical business or organizational issue, which is risk management. And here it comes down to a question of what sense can somebody have, what confidence can they have in the reliability of the translation coming through. What Lucy said earlier was that it has to be basically the same in both languages. And one thing I've always looked at is that it has to be obviously correct between source and target, but it also has to be current, because let's say there's a new, well, we just had elections in France. Let's say that the election went in a different direction, so there might be a new prime minister. So it has to be current. Yesterday's truth is not the same as today's. And it has to be consistent in some way with the other material. So it's not just at an individual document level, but with other documents across the way. So this really broadens the question of reliability. So this, I think, brings us to Konstantin here with what your tools are doing, which is giving us some sense of, let's say, certainty or the reliability of the translations once they've gone through the machine. Can you talk a little about how your how Intento is with neural machine translation with other solutions is giving you that content level now, that content confidence assessment?
Thanks, Don. What I will start with is we were talking a lot about training, but training is not the only way to make machine translation fit to the purpose, and sometimes it's far not enough. because there are many cases where a translation depends on the context, should depend on the context and on the metadata of a specific use case. Like, for example, if you translate like a live chat from English to any other language, you have to care about tone of voice. In many cases, you have to care about how you address a gender of a person. And even in English, living in the United States, well, we forget about those language nuances, but we take care about, talking inclusive. In other languages, it's far more important. And so what we're working a lot is on this sort of last mile tools, which they may do source content pre-processing, they may prime machine translation models in certain way, they may do automated post-editing to fit it to the purpose. And it's fair to say that it's not only about machine translation, because often if you look at the workflow and how the system is organized, there is no such metadata in the right place. So in many cases, you should start with actually changing workflows or even changing IT infrastructure, because someone decided to use XLIF in somewhere. There is just no way to fit this metadata in. So this is very important, and especially with large models, which Michel described, because there's no easy way to quickly retrain them. What you do, you're priming them, you're inquiring them in a certain way to get what you need. And that's actually I think it's quite similar to how we humans do, right? You may spend many years about learning the language and learn it perfectly, but you need certain machine intelligence to use it properly. And sometimes you may be a perfect speaker, but you will be considered as a, message may not be delivered because it's improper. And I would say that also, speaking about zero shot, I think one thing we should remember that it's extremely vulnerable to biases, because one of the things which parallel text brings, it sort of a little bit helps with these cultural differences between languages. And in zero shot, it may happen that you just project certain bias from one language to another, and suddenly it turns to be really disastrous. So I would say that's our approach. We do not develop our MT technology. We rely on what vendors do. And we see that some of them provide those parameters to tune these contextual nuances like tone of voice, and some others. Others don't. Other nuances are not addressed. So we're working a lot on making tools to control those things. And we're working a lot with our customers to explain that it's not only about this, bring the data in, train the model, plug the model, and here you go. It should be solved as a whole. And as you said, thinking about people in the first turn.
Yeah. So from what I see, Intento's been really good at giving this confidence level at the document level. But we're talking about this kind of, inclusive language is a really good example. And in general, pronouns are a real pain in the butt. If you talk about, the director of the Translation Bureau in Canada, and then later we say she, do we know that that's a connection? And should she be they in certain woke places and whatever? But at the end of the day, the question here is it's about recursion, going through the document multiple times, making sure that those segments are analyzed. So where is, in this confidence analysis that you're doing, where does the segment level analysis and recursion fit in the model? Is it smart enough to go back and give revise its confidence level based on multiple passes?
It's a good question. So, I would say it's about, Kirti had a great talk on the first day of the conference, about this new type of workflows which work based on real-time feedback. So that's what we mostly rely on, is we don't have magic bullet to look at that translation and say that, oh, that's a good translation, that's a bad translation, real-time automatically. And I mean, I may not be very popular opinion, but despite of many messages, that technology, this real-time estimation technology still has to, spend some time out there to mature. So what you really can rely on is on end-user feedback. Sometimes it's explicit, such as, oh, that's a bad translation, escalation. Sometimes it's implicit, such as, well, people do not buy this product because something is off. And the goal is based on this feedback to quickly react and fix it. And that's also in part why we think so much not about training, which takes time, but about ways to quickly fix it on the fly by changing some metadata. Well, other things too, like that. Yeah.
Lucy, you probably experience this all the time. Can you give us a sense of what you're seeing?
Well, something triggered, I'm listening to you, Konstantin. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but when we spoke about inclusive language, a lot of efforts are being made around the world to make sure that we're being respectful when we communicate with humans. And that's not only a translation issue, it's a terminology issue. So that's why I like the diagram that is on the board right now, because the linguist has access to all of these tools, right? The intelligent terminology management. We are right now developing new terminology to support, inclusivity, diversity, sexual diversity, while we are translating texts for all government institutions, parliament. So I think that translation, we were talking, Konstantin, about making sure that we understand, like there are ways to understand if the level of confidence we have in data. But I think there are so many things. Like, I agree with the other panelists talking about the importance of metadata. Like, we need to understand, and Michel's point about understanding the user. So who's the target audience? What is the level of speech? What is the tone that we're looking for? What is the readability level? Like, it's a different, it's one thing to speak to general population, which we equate to maybe 6th grade level right now, versus translating for the Supreme Court of Canada or national defense documents that are for negotiations with other countries, even things like confidentiality and access restrictions. So those are all, data that we have to find a better way of doing. We're not perfect at all at the Translation Bureau of Canada, but these are all super important in defining what quality means. And also, I think on a second point is, we are doing a lot of work on training, retooling the translators right now so that they understand the powers of AI. They know which tools are at their disposal, human in the middle, human in the loop. But I think we need to do a better job, frankly, in the government of Canada to pay attention at the beginning of our workflow. If we started, as you said, Konstantin, like, it takes a lifetime to master a language. If we started by assigning a text to a language expert, either one of our staff members or a freelancer, someone that has experience in the domain, understands the client, understands the terminology, I think that would make us a lot more efficient. So project managers, need the tools, sophisticated tools to basically do efficient work assignment. And I think that is where we're focusing our attention in our workflow. Not to say we've solved the translator of the future of work issue. We're still working on that, but I think everything is evolving, and definitely humans are still involved, but at different levels, to ensure that we're not, at the least case, less severe case, embarrassing someone, but at the worst case, putting someone's health and safety in danger.
Yeah, I'd like to stop for a second and see if we could put up the results of the first polling question. See if we have any insight to what people are most concerned about. And let's see, this is just the Do we have the actually response from the audience here or not? I guess not. Then let's move on to the second one here. And Kirill, you had something you wanted to say on this topic as well?
Yeah, just really quickly. So Konstantin was talking about waiting for feedback from the users, and Lucy was talking about kind of front loading the most important decisions based on, who would be the optimal, linguist, whether it's a human one or a machine one for a particular assignment. I think we tend to usually think between those two lines, because waiting for feedback from users takes too long. Okay, in some cases it might take months to see any kind of reaction or huge political scandal, God forbid. And when you do things early on, you cannot really know exactly what the result is. So the risk management approach that I was talking about here, this looking back at what we've actually done, of what we actually translated and delivered, allows us to inform those front-loaded decisions before user feedback potentially comes in. So yeah, only working with feedback is a bit too reactive and might not be the only thing you want to do. You always have to proactively inspect your own process, inspect your own translations, and based on metadata that you can discover in that process, change also how the workflow itself is arranged, even if the feedback is good, right? So there's always room for this continuous optimization and improvement with the right process and the right tools.
Okay, let's move on to the next section. We are running out of time here. Would like to bring up the responsive MT because we've been circling around this. Last year, my colleague Arla Lamel presented at AMTA the framework for responsive MT. We characterized it in our research here as the next major milestone in the space following adaptive. So it builds on neural MT. It leverages techniques from what Michelle was talking about, the zero-shot capabilities. Importantly, it considers experts that have been coded for specific issues. It automatically adjusts to the domains. This falls into it's increasingly smarter, taking advantage of more and more tools, and can deal with specialty text types at different levels at the segment level, responds to changes in the metadata. Konstantin, you mentioned the importance of large models in designing this, and we've seen recently some research coming out of Microsoft on using experts and smaller models. Have you looked at this and how you manage the Intento analysis?
Well, so we work with about 40 different MT platforms, and they are built on very different technologies. So some of them, as is on the slide, are adaptive, meaning that they can quickly sort of retrain. But in many cases, it's sort of lightweight training, meaning that for some purposes, you have to really go and retrain all those neural network layers, which takes time. And then there are large models where you cannot really, GPT rolled out for training just maybe a month ago. And in many other cases, not possible. So in those cases, you change the way how you work with the model. So we apply different techniques here. And I would say just like middle part of the slide is just one of the options. Technologies are different. They all have their use cases where they're the strongest. Like if you're training general model into being highly specialized, like high reliable medicine translations, you probably want it to be like trained heavily on domain specific data. So yeah, different ways depends on the purpose.
Yeah, use cases brings up the question of domains here, which is I know something that the NRCC and the Translation Bureau have been working on. Michelle, can you address this slide here in terms of the research path that the NRCC is taking?
Yeah, thanks, Don. So yeah, this picture, the idea behind this picture is to show that describing the characteristics of any given document, any given text, any given translation project is a multi-dimensional thing. And we talk about domains, we talk about clients, but Lucy also talked about readability, and then you can think about within a given domain, within a given readability level, for a given client, you can have different genres, you can have different levels of language, whether you're informal or more formal. And so there's a bunch of different dimensions with which you can describe any given text. And this is an old thing in machine translation. It's ever since the 1970s, when people like Richard Kittredge and Jack Lehrberger defined the notion of sub-language. We've known that specialized empty systems typically work better than general purpose systems. And you want to, and this is still true today. I mean, Google and Microsoft and Yandex have gotten us used to these general purpose systems, but there's always the understanding behind that specialized systems are still going to work better for specific domains. But if you start characterizing text and documents according to multiple dimensions, like you do in this slide, at some point, this is not sustainable. You cannot train specific systems for all of these dimensions. It's just not feasible. You run into data sparsity issues, you run into computational complexity issues, you run into environmental issues if you have to train huge neural networks for dozens or hundreds of different specialized empty systems. So this is not sustainable. And I think that what we will see in the future, and this comes back to your slide about this responsive MT, are systems that have been exposed to multiple domains, multiple genres, multiple readability levels, but that can dynamically adapt either by looking at metadata that you provided upfront, saying, well, okay, this text, the target audience for this text is so-and-so, and work with that metadata to dynamically adapt to a specific context. Or even better yet, just look at the wider context. And this is something that, as far as I can tell, I have not seen any commercial MT system go beyond the isolated segment level when doing translations. They just don't do it. And we need to go that way. And this is one of the directions I want to see MT research going, is looking at the wider context to adapt. So,
well, the requirement you're laying out here is one that I think Lucy mentioned earlier. When somebody's learning to read, this accretion of information, and importantly here, in any domain, what you have is something that's ultimately there's stuff outside the domain that has to be dealt with, and any human is able to do code switching, or domain switching, or register switching, or this inclusiveness switching we were talking about. So a system that's trained to do let's say, all of the multiple axes that you might have, doing that for every situation, for every use case, is ultimately a fool's errand. So the polymorphism is really critical here, that this can be sustained over multiple instances. This really puts, let's say, some increased cognitive requirements on the tools that are processing these and trying to come up with a sense of the certainty. So Kirill, any sense here of when we'll see solutions like this that'll adapt as well to the quality analysis that's required for any one of these use cases?
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to say about this concept of responsive is, of course, adjusting itself to feedback. So when we demo Content Co platform, I always used to say that, okay, this is the workflow for human translations. You inspect it for quality, and then you send the feedback to the translator who made those mistakes so that, he might learn from those. And then when we talk about machines, I always used to say, but for machine translation assessment, you don't need that workflow because, machine translation engines cannot adjust themselves to response to feedback yet. So, thinking about what we're discussing here, I'm having a sense that this day where a machine translation engine can actually accept feedback and respond to feedback as a human is actually much closer than I used to think even last year. So this is how fast I think this is moving. But then again, right, just as any human, regardless of the polymorphic capabilities, mistakes are inevitable. It's just a question of how many and whether they are in the right permitted places and of the right type. So again, back to the risk management perspective based on data that at the moment only humans can reliably collect and make decisions on.
Okay, well, let's jump into the last section here, and which I'll start out here with what we also characterized in the presentation Earl gave last year for the report that we had done. Responsive MT ultimately has to come into the realm of being ethically aligned as well, tied to social responsibility. There's CSR, corporate social responsibility is a big issue. Ethics are in business and the kinds of things that Lucy was talking about for the government or what we see for legal entities or whatever. These are all things where the systems have to be smart enough to know when they're working properly, when they're not. So it's MT that knows its limits when it can say, just in this week's news, I'm afraid that I can't do that, Dave. In the Hal scenario, it might cause harm, might cause some risk. So in this era of responsible machine translation, looking forward, is this where humans start to disappear, or do we still need these humans? And this really goes back to the questions that Lucy was asking earlier about training and getting people up to speed. So Lucy, where do humans fit in your planning for this future scenario?
Thank you, Don, and very interesting, colleagues, because I'm picking up a lot of themes that are resonating. I mentioned humans, the human translators, but also humans, as Kirill was just saying, like people that can basically understand the context, the nuance. For us, also subject matter experts are important, but the dedicated client teams that understand the clients, understand their mandate, the tone. So I think there's humans working at different levels. We spoke about project managers as well that are important to assign the right texts to the right people. And when I say people, one thing that I maybe is a bit controversial, but I like to throw out, we don't use the word post-editing in the Translation Bureau because we figure translation for us means, making sure the text is readable in the other language, but there's always the involvement of a machine in there. So we've automated, like pretty much everything is automated. We're leveraging and maximizing the use of AI. But for sure, everything needs to basically be reviewed by a human before it gets out. So obviously, you understand, very important, and we're collaborating with all Canadian universities in Canada because we can't do this alone. Being the largest employer of translators as well as interpreters, we need to work on la relève, so the next generation of translators. So we intake 50 to 100 students every year. So they get training. They don't all come to work in the government, but they also go to private sector. So we collaborate on a whole bunch of initiatives to make sure we're training the next generation of language experts, language les conseillers that we say, because they're not necessarily translating as the old paradigm is understood, but now they're basically adding their psychological, the intellectual value is basically to review the texts that are coming out of machines. And finally, I would say, we have a translation memory of 4 billion words at the Translation Bureau. It's huge. So speaking with, picking up on some topics about Michel, like we need we have been developing client-specific translation memories as well as domain-specific memories to break this massive database down so that it makes sense and it's useful and relevant for each of the teams that are working with different clients and on different domains. I think lots of work to do, and I'm surprised to hear you say, Kirill, that you're now seeing that, you know, there is the evolution is going very fast, but I'm still very suspicious of seeing a future where humans will not be essential to ensure high quality translations.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, let's get that last poll question up on the board here, and we'll switch to the Q&A. And I'll throw up my, I call it the Zenodon paradox based on Zeno's paradox, that any increase in function, quality, or performance of machine translation will result in increased requirements for function, quality, and performance. So there's a long way to go still. So everyone answer the question here. And David, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we do have questions. First, I would like to thank our panelists for this wonderful presentation on the path to tomorrow. So here are the first questions that I would like to ask to the panel. Would you base your NMT training on domain or client or both? What are the initial results?
Any volunteers?
I can start. I've said it's always a question. I'm not sure, you know, probably government has lots of resources, but when we work with commercial companies, they're often restricted in how much they can invest in going into domains, especially if they work with many brands or like they do many films or games or anything like that. And it's always a question. So we run lots of evaluations, and I must say that we often see that it's not feasible to train a model for every subdomain, especially because by combining lots of data, you still get much bigger boost than by splitting into small chunks and using these small chunks to specialize. But it's more important, I would say, to think about use cases and content types rather than domains. So that's where a huge difference. Is it colloquial or long form? Is it marketing or technical? But as I said previously, it's not always training.
Okay, we do have another question from the audience is what return on the investment can we expect of keeping the human in the loop? What impacts can be seen if deployed?
I'd like to take up that one, if I may. I would actually flip the question around. What might go wrong if we take the humans out of the loop, right? So would that be unacceptable from a risk management perspective? And my personal answer to this is no. And one of the things I think about is how do we decide when to take a human out of the loop, right? So, and what happens if we take, and how do we decide if the risk is acceptable? So we definitely need humans for that. I think humanity is not ready to give away this kind of high-level decision-making to machines yet. So the most impactful parts of the quality conversation will probably still be driven by human brain power, and that's great because it's a really, really good way to deploy that.
Yeah, one thing that we've seen in discussions with users is that a big issue is that neural MT has been most certain in cases when it's most wrong. So, you know, the situation is keeping an eye on it, having the data flowing through, and having those humans continuously checking the veracity and accuracy, so to speak, of what it is.
And if I may add, David, if we have time, just a compliment to what Don and Kirill were saying. It's for us, the bottom line is that there is a return on investment, because human really helps us to generate high quality enriched training data for the next level AI. So we are able to translate faster, cheaper, better when we have better data. So basically is like a chicken and egg situation. And I heard some of my colleagues talk about there is only a small percentage of information that is generated not only by the public sector, but by the private sector that is translated because of the level of effort, the aversion to risk for a bad translation. So I think that is key for at least transparency in government operations. If we can have high quality data, high quality metadata, train our engines, we can simply, provide even more transparency and information for citizens of all countries, including Canada.
Actually, I have a question for the government, and this is for some other highly precise kinds of things. Is what's the threshold for certainty that you need? If it's 95% certainty that it's right, going through the systems, is that good enough, or does it have to be 100% from language to language?
Is that maybe I can start to answer that, since we have a quality framework that was put in place. This is adhering to the international quality standards. It's not so much a percentage, but it has to do with not only the technical aspects of the language, but also the non-tangible aspects of the language, like tone and localization. So for us, there is we have a methodology that has been established where we know kind of what levels need to be reached to meet the minimum threshold. And we do have some risk management approaches. There are really high visibility documents. Some of you may have seen that there was an occupation on our Parliament Hill. Truckers came and basically took the occupation of the road. So there was an Emergency Order Act legislation that was passed, had to be passed in Parliament urgently. Well, that is a high visibility document. So we have a protocol, a quality assurance protocol for those high visibility documents. And then we do apply some risk management to other documents that are lower visibility. So internal documents that are only shared within an agency, for example. So things that are not public facing, we apply a different level of rigor, because ensuring high level quality, it costs. It's not cheap. So we're trying to, making sure that we're meeting the requirements of the Official Languages Act, but not always exceeding. But in some cases, we do apply the highest standards, just because we know that, there will be a lot of public scrutiny on these documents.
Here is another question, and perhaps this is the last question from the audience. Can an existing translation engine, Google, Microsoft, be trained to tap into customers' translation memory?
Well, that's an easy to answer, yes. Moreover, most likely must be trained. And that's, I think, the joy we got maybe since 3-4 years ago, when transfer learning went into production, where you can actually take this big model and add a little bit of your data, which is between different tangents, ranges from just one sentence to 10,000 sentences, and get much better suited translation. So you absolutely must do that.
All right. Well, that is all we have time to answer for today. Again, I would like to thank our panelists for an excellent presentation. And to the rest of you and the audience, please continue enjoying the last day of the GALA conference. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, David. Good job moderating. Don moderating and David being our host.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.